It's Electric Drives. Your electric vehicle future starts right now. I'm your host, Anthony Algmin. It wasn't too long ago that I started driving an electric vehicle, and it wasn't easy to learn everything I needed to know to make that transition. I created this show to make it easier for others looking to move to electric, and in a world of $5 and $6 gasoline, that's more and more people every day. Our goal with Electric Drives is to cover the basics, brought to you by real people with real jobs, real commutes, real road trips, and who are relying on real vehicles to get us to all of those. We're out there using electric vehicles in our normal lives, and we'll share the wisdom we've gained from using and living with these electric vehicles every day. You can join in the conversation by sending your questions and topic ideas to questions@electricdrives.us, or make comments on our YouTube videos, or join our Patreon page. From time to time, we'll bring novices and experts onto the show for more interactive learning, and really, that's what this is all about. We're here to share and learn together from our collective stories and from our collective wisdom as we make this transition as a world to more and more electric vehicles. And ultimately, we want to reduce the confusion we encounter when going from our norm of gasoline to electric vehicles. What the Electric Drive podcast is not, though, is an electric vehicle news show. If you want that, I recommend the Inside EVs podcast. Those guys get to drive and test all the cool stuff. They do a fantastic job of it. And they really serve a market of electric vehicle enthusiasts, which is actually not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to, is reluctant-ist? Is that a word? What we're trying to do here is educate the folks that are like, this is probably something we might want to consider, but it's not like you're going and researching this because you enjoy it. You might recognize that, hey, this gasoline situation isn't good, and I probably want to do something different. What is that? What do I need to do? And I think that's something that we can focus on in this show that just isn't happening elsewhere in the market right now. So we want to get on Electric Drives, we want to reach those folks that are just getting started and really want to understand those basic aspects of EV ownership. So some of the things that we're going to talk about are going to include things like differences between level 1, level 2, and level 3 charging. If you don't know what those mean today, stay tuned. We'll cover those. Charging is a big deal with electric vehicles. We'll have many conversations about that. Think about things like wiring a house for an electric vehicle. That's something else that's really important. If you have a house, you're interested in doing that, that's something you're going to want to consider. It's really, I remember when I wired my house up. It was really intimidating, even just to find an electrician who could do it. I didn't even know what to ask for. And so we'll talk about some of those things and what you might expect or what you might cost, or some things that may not be obvious that we've kind of learned along the way. Things like how much our electricity bill will rise compared to what we save on gas. We'll think about what happens in the wintertime. Batteries don't perform as well in the winter. What does that really mean? What's it like to drive an electric vehicle during the wintertime? Other things that we might want to think about if we're going and shopping for electric vehicles today, what are the things to consider? What are the things that might be more or less important than you might have thought about in the past? We'll cover topics like that as well. So stay tuned with us. Check out additional episodes. We're going to try to keep these relatively short, relatively easy to watch a couple or listen to a couple. We are recording audio, and we'll be distributing that via all of the podcast platforms out there. And then we also will have the video, like if you're watching this today on YouTube, we'll upload all the episodes as YouTube videos as well. And it won't just be me. We'll be having a lot of other folks that will be coming in and sharing their wisdom, because that's really, one of the things that inspired me to do this podcast was the fact that I wanted to move to an electric vehicle. I knew, hey, I have a reasonable technical background. I could probably handle the complexity. I'm lucky that I have a house that I could wire up. So I knew there was enough things that I'm like, I'm probably a good potential electric vehicle owner. But I still found it intimidating. And it wasn't, if I hadn't had a few folks that I was able to talk with and learn from and get my questions answered by, I never would have been able to make that move as confidently as I had. And so on this episode, we're just going to get started, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that journey that I had personally. So we're recording this, and this is originally going live in August of 2022. We're recording it a week or two before that, and I've been driving an electric vehicle since about March of 2021, and I had taken a new job. So COVID pandemic, still we're coming out of it now, it seems, but for the last few years, it's really been dominating a lot of our lives, or at least impacting a lot of our lives in significant ways. And like many folks, I had a job change. I took a new position, but in that new position, we were during the pandemic. I took the job in the early days of the pandemic. We were working remotely for the better part of a year, and I knew that at some point I would have to start driving into the office, and that time was a little bit before March of 2021, kind of over the winter time, and started to move back into the office around then. And my office, so for the new job, the office is about 38 miles away from where I live. And I had at the time had kind of a mid-size SUV. It was a luxury SUV, so it was requiring premium gas, and it was kind of a soul-crushing tollway commute for 38 miles. It wasn't horrible. I still could do it in under an hour most of the time. But it was a lot of miles, and it was using a lot of gas. And so at the time, in March of 2021, I was spending about $18 a day in today's fuel prices. I guess then it was about $12 a day. And I was just sitting there every week filling that gas tank up. And I'm like, I am just wasting money and gasoline, and it just felt like my car was being destroyed by this commute. And I'm like, this just isn't the way to live. And the midsize SUV, while it served me well when I was working mostly from home, when I was doing that kind of drive, I'm like, something more efficient would be a good idea. Maybe a battery electric could work for me. And I'll tell you, the gas cost in $5 and $6 gas land, we're looking at about $18 daily. Today, if I were still driving that car. The electric vehicles that I've had, and that'll be a different episode where I take you through my journey of electric cars over the last year and a half. But the electricity for that costs on average about $2. So $18 daily to about $2 daily. And that doesn't even factor in the amount of less maintenance that the new car, the electric vehicles have, in terms of you don't have oil changes, you have fewer moving parts, you don't have the same kind of service that's necessary to keep the things running well. And so there's a lot of benefits to that just from a financial perspective. And what I found is that I really did it because I didn't like to pay the money for gas. It just felt like a hole in my wallet with the money leaving every week. And I said, I like the lower incremental costs. I was even willing to pay a little bit more. And I'll be the first to admit, like, I don't want to destroy the environment. I do not want to, cause more global warming, but it wasn't the top criteria in me buying a car. I'm like, my one car, that is not what makes me determine what I'm going to drive to work in. It's just not. I'll be honest, like, I don't want to do it, but I'm also not going to buy a car just because it's going to save the environment. So that wasn't really a factor for me. And so for me, it was like, what can I drive comfortably to and from work? How can I avoid going to the gas station? How can I save some money on that commute and make it so that, what could be a pretty, depressing commuting existence got better with an electric vehicle, substantially so. And so for me, that really made it so that I recognized the possibility of what an electric vehicle could do on a commuting basis. Like, this is kind of the classic, I felt like I was a classic electric vehicle person, right? Where I've got a long commute, but it's not so long that I couldn't do it on one charge round trip each day. I have a house in the suburbs that I could wire up for a level 2 charging station. We'll talk about that on a different episode. And really, it simplified my life. Like, no gas stations once a week. You ever notice, like, if you have a commute and you're thinking to yourself, well, this sounds somewhat familiar, how painful is it to go to the gas station? Because I hated it. It was like every time I needed to stop at the gas station, I had something better to do. Like, I was either, trying to get home to see my kids and have dinner, or I was trying to get to work when I was inevitably late for a meeting that starts at the beginning of the day. Like, never convenient. Not to mention you end up smelling like gas. Why is it? Why is it that every gas station everywhere, whenever you use it, you end up smelling like gas? Like, they've never been able to figure that out. Like, my hands are always smelly. And I really don't think that I'm doing anything uniquely wrong there. I just feel like I'm, doing what everybody else does. And I've never been able to, I was never capable of taking the gas pump out of the car and not dribbling a couple little drips of gasoline on the gas cap area or the side of the car, and then I have to wipe it up, and it's like you still smell. It's like I think I have an unreasonable amount of disdain for the actual process of getting gas in a car. But regardless, that was just one of many things. And I can say, there's smaller things that I enjoy personally about the electric vehicles that I think are worth noting as we start to explore all of these conversations, all of these things with the transition to electric vehicles. And that is the way that an electric vehicle accelerates, and like the kind of, you'll hear about the kind of torquiness and the punchiness with which it accelerates. It's to me, it's linear. It's like when you take off in an airplane, how the force of the engines just kind of has that constant push behind you, whereas in a car, the way the acceleration happens is kind of a hump at each, and then you kind of lag in each of the gear shifts, and then you end up kind of launching forward more, and it's kind of up and down. An electric vehicle, I mean, it's an electric motor. There's typically no transmission. You just put the electrons going, and you're just going to kind of accelerate in that linear fashion, and many of them, not all of them, but many of them will kind of accelerate very quickly from the very beginning. And that's an interesting feeling. And even some of the ones that are not like super sporty or even have a whole lot of horsepower will still be quick. There's a difference between quick and fast. And so the ability to drive electric vehicles is not how it used to be 10 years ago, when the electric vehicles could go 20 miles and they were super slow and they just were sadness boxes on wheels. Like, that's just not how it is today. And a lot of the experience of driving an electric vehicle goes beyond some of these quantitative measures around how much it costs, and you don't have to go to the gas stations. The maintenance isn't as bad, but there's a lot of other factors of there's technology. Many of the electric vehicles today are getting the best in technology, and some of that's due to Tesla kind of being very software forward in how they were leading the pack and a lot of the innovation in the electric vehicle space. And there's a reason why they're selling a lot of cars compared to many of the other automakers right now. But it's easy to forget, there's been a lot of automakers that have been making electric vehicles for quite a long time. General Motors, BMW, there's quite a few that have been around, but it took kind of Tesla to really change and innovate in the space in a way where these things became cool. I used to have, luxury cars and gas powered cars, and I always thought, BMW is cool or Porsche is cool, but all the kids today, so we've got younger kids, Tesla, that's the brand everybody wants. And I'm like, why? And I still haven't really gotten a good answer on that, why it's cool and why all the kids think the Teslas are awesome. But, they're good cars and they're good electric vehicles. And certainly have changed the calculus for what the expectations are around electric vehicles, but they're certainly not the only game in town. And that's one of the things that inspired me to do this podcast as well, is that electric vehicles and Tesla are not the same. That is not, they're not the only answer in terms of the cars you might consider. And I think there's a lot of good reasons to consider things that are not Teslas. And we'll certainly talk about that in episodes on the show as well, because every automaker out there right now recognizes that electric vehicles are going to be the future. And like it or not, most people will end up driving an electric vehicle at some point down the road. So we are in a place where, if you think about, just in the last year, so many new cars have come out, and that's going to continue. Now, there's a waiting list for a lot of them. There's a lot of cars that have been launched, but the amount that they're able to produce is still relatively small. So that's going to be something else that we'll want to talk about in terms of the dynamics of the marketplace for electric vehicles right now. There's some serious supply and demand imbalances that exist in this space. And there's going to be some trade-offs. So if you want an electric vehicle right now, you're either going to pay through the nose, or you're going to be able to select from a handful of different relatively available electric vehicles. Most likely, if you want one like today, you're going to be buying a used one. There's not too many that are just new cars available in inventory today. You may luckily spike something where you can get lucky and walk into a dealership, but you'll probably still be paying some sort of markup for that at this point. I mean, we're in a case where $5 and $6 gasoline is the norm right now. So, these are things that are probably going on in your head. If you're listening to this podcast, you're interested in electric vehicles. There's a lot of things moving around in the market right now. And our goal here is going to be to try to make it a little bit easier to navigate. And that's where I really want to encourage you. Once again, that email address that we'll be monitoring for questions and topic suggestions or what have you is questions@electricdrives.us. And that's really the key thing to remember and take away from this first episode is as we're starting something new here. We want to create a community of people that can help one another who aren't just dedicated. Like one of my frustrations is like, every time, because I've had actually a couple different electric vehicles over the past year and a half, and each time I had to go from like the Mustang Mach-E forum, and then I had to go to a Volkswagen forum, and then a Tesla forum. And it's like, nobody's sharing the tips amongst these different makes. And it's like, why do I just care about electric vehicles? And I want to be able to converse about it without being married to a maker, like a brand. That doesn't matter. There needs to be a broader community here, and I want to help us at least find some of that, especially for those folks that are not going to be the electric vehicle enthusiasts like I admittedly am. I want people to be able to transition to this, change a little bit about how they're commuting or how they're driving around, how they're working with a car with their families, or how they're going on road trips or what have you. We'll cover all that ground over coming episodes, but to me, it's about like, hey, not everybody needs to be an enthusiast about their car, but it is important to understand how to responsibly own one, use one, and evolve with the changing times and the way we're going from gas-powered cars to electric-powered cars. So that's the goal, right? And so questions@electricdrives.us. We've also set up a Patreon page at patreon.com/electric drives. That's where you can subscribe, become a patron, help us support some of the show, but then also get some additional benefits like being able to watch when we record these live sessions, which will typically be a week or two, or maybe sometimes more, before they go live on the podcast channel. So you could actually watch the live recording process, and you can start to interact more directly with us. You can ask questions on those recording sessions. You can send questions to our email address, and we'll certainly prioritize the questions that we get from the patrons. And really, we're just going to try to make this whatever you need it to be. So if you are one of those people out there right now looking and thinking about an electric vehicle, get involved. Give us a shout. We'll even have some of you on the podcast, and we can talk through some of your questions, and we can go through your particular situation. Because you know what? You're probably not the only one in that kind of situation. So we'll be able to go through it. People will learn, and we can all kind of share the collective knowledge that we build through those conversations. So, that's it for today. We're just going to wrap it up there. So don't forget to just subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that bell icon, get notifications. We'll be coming out with these episodes at least weekly. We'll try to do it even more frequently than that to get going. Again, if you'd like to get live virtual recording studio access for when we're doing the recordings, or get your questions and topic suggestions at the top of the list and help support the show, join us on patreon.com/electric drives. Always appreciate 5-star ratings and reviews. We love your comments and feedback. We have our website at electricdrives.us. Again, any questions or topic suggestions or questions at electricdrives.us. So thank you for spending some time with us, and we wish you a smooth road ahead on your own electric drives. Thanks, everybody.